Hi,
Good
this is
evening.
Betty Arce.
Hi, Betty.
Hi, I'm on Community Board 7,
Copy.
and I happen to be the chair of our Environmental and Sanitation Committee. And I'm sure that much of what I will probably raise is raised throughout not only the Bronx, but throughout the city. But one of the biggest issues for us right now is just the trying to get organic composting. Community Board 7 was participating, and we do have, I guess, people who are still participating, but it has been, right now, we know that the expansion of the program has been halted to a certain extent, and we've been just trying to get people interested and to participate. It's been very, very difficult to get that off the ground. The people who have been doing it want to participate. It's a question of getting new people to get involved. And Community Board 7 is made up of a lot of, we used to have more 1 and 2 family homes. A lot of them have been demolished. Some of them are being rented out. So we have it's a big challenge trying to figure out how to get people interested in this and understand the benefits of the project.
So my question would be, is there the interest that already is there? Because I know Community Board 8 is the only board that is actually getting curbside service. The folks in CB7, do you find that they're participating via drop-offs, or what are the?
That's exactly what it is right now. It's drop-offs, identifying more drop-offs so that they're convenient to people in the area. We do have a few, and but it is still a struggle. The struggle is even if people are not, even if it's not being collected, we're trying to figure out a way to get people to understand how to dispose of their organic waste, even if they cannot get to a drop-off, so that when you're walking up and down the street on the day that garbage is being collected, you don't see ripped open garbage bags all over the place. And that's what we're finding. People just throw their food waste into their black garbage bags or whatever, put it on the side, and raccoons come, rats come, open up the bags, and it's then strewn all over the place. So that's the first part. First, getting people to understand that there's a way in which you can dispose of your food waste, and then there's a place that you can take your food waste if you so choose to do so. So, and that's been the struggle. We have a lot of immigrant families, and so there's a language barrier, cultural issues. So, we have a lot of things that we got to deal with.
Okay.
So that's one of my main concerns.
I think that'll be helpful. There's currently an RFP out in order to do some sort of study. And I think that we might want to connect with the organizations doing it. I'm one of the things that we're planning on doing coming up in June is to actually go out into the neighborhoods and do a cleanup. But in the middle of doing a cleanup, RFP is a request for proposal. But in the middle of doing a cleanup, actually educate folks about these initiatives, but also gather some information from them to figure out what would help them to buy in. We'll get to you, Allison. Right. Thank you so much for raising your hand. But I think that it's CB7, so thank you for raising that, because that's what I'm trying to understand from each community board. What is really the main focus of what you all want to put some energy behind? And it's different for different boards. So I appreciate this. One of the things that I plan on doing, so just in full transparency, I also have a business that does a lot of work around sustainability and hip hop and compost and all of that. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is going out into the street and basically kind of like, people be going in the street asking questions and just doing silly stuff. Like, that's exactly what I plan to do all around the Bronx. I just need to get my costume together with the costume that's going to be memorable, like kind of like how the rat guy goes around. There's like this guy, I don't know if you all have seen him, but there's this guy that walks around the city with this like rat mask and gloves on and basically walks around the city. So it's a very memorable thing, right? So I got to find something that's like consistent that I wear. However, I planned on going out and kind of talking to people and really just understanding at the very basic level what will help them to buy into it, and also with testing their knowledge. So maybe that's something that we can actually push in CB7 to really kind of just get folks and get them. One of the reasons why I use hip hop as a bridge is because it like loosens people up when it's time to have this kind of conversation, as opposed to coming at them from this very technical place, but like really like, hey, it's fun, it's like trendy, it's let's talk about it. It could be all of these other things and entertaining, and how do we bring that energy to it? So I would be interested in connecting with CB7 and Lilibeth, just write that down, because like we're like literally taking right now, we're like in the space of like, okay, what does each community board need and want to focus on, and what's the event? So we can try to figure out what month you all have, but we want to be able to plan an event in each community board in each month. So we'll find out what we're going to be doing CB4, I want to say, for June, and so we can figure out what we can do for the rest of the year. And I'm glad that this is the organics thing is a big thing. I want to get folks involved. And then also you spoke to the language barrier and cultural barrier, so I think it'll be especially important to bring folks in that can also speak to their demographic of people, just on our behalf and on the collective behalf, in order to be able to reach folks. So thank you for raising that, and we will absolutely follow up with you around a plan to move forward, like amplifying, the drop-off sites that already exist, and we can maybe potentially identify setting up a drop-off location that actually might be a little bit more convenient for folks who want to participate. So if we recognize and can identify that some of the barriers to participating may lie within, proximity to the drop-off location, well, then we can deal with that. And then for folks, kind of just get them interested to kind of be a part of the habit, because, worst case scenario, what can happen is if they're not all that interested in dropping off themselves, we can create these small little hubs of like consolidation points where we can, I have a larger plan for how the city can pay what this looks like for workers, and how we can create green jobs from it. So we'll definitely be in touch, but just look out for an email from us in order to be able to move that conversation forward.
Thank you.
Yes, Allison.
Yeah, hi. I am with the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I'm the chair of the Organics Committee. I wanted to see if you guys were aware, or if we can talk about it maybe at the end, if you're aware of the organics bill.
Yeah.
That, because I'm thinking that, I don't know who we've been working on getting all the council members on board as sponsors. And I don't know who your council member is in CB7, but if they're not currently sponsoring, we would encourage you to encourage people to contact the council member, email them, and make sure they ask them to sponsor the bill. And I could share like a draft email that we've been using, if that would be helpful, but we are trying to get more people to encourage. There's 31 sponsors right now. So trying to get more. And then the other thing and I don't know, maybe we can talk more about this towards the end. I know you have a speaker. I don't want to mess around with your agenda and go off tangent. But there's a budget hearing on Wednesday, a finance committee budget hearing. And Dior, I just heard you say something about you had ideas about how to receive funding. I mean, that's a great opportunity to, testify in person or just submit written testimony with your ideas.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Can you do me a favor and just put the link in the chat, and then Lilibeth, you can add the budget hearing info for Wednesday. And because I thought it was already, it wasn't finalized already. There's still another hearing.
Yeah, the hearing on Wednesday is the one where the public can actually provide testimony.
Got it.
Last
Perfect.
hearing was just to hear people talk and have council members ask their questions, but this is a chance to hear from the public. This is probably the last chance to hear from the public.
I figured it sounds like it. Okay, so that's actually really helpful. Thank you, Lilibeth, for mentioning that, to send that draft email in the chat. Yes to the testimony. Yes, I think let's identify the council members in the Bronx that haven't sponsored it, and then we can better figure out how to involve the community boards with that. So Allison, when you send that email, we'll use that email thread in order to kind of to collaborate and figure out the plan moving forward for who it is that is actually missing. And thank you for hopping on, because that's actually really helpful to be able to, you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, last I checked, which was Friday, the only Bronx council member sponsoring was Dinowitz.
You sure it's not more than that?
Well, as of Friday, I didn't check today. I can maybe check
I
during.
feel, yeah, check, because I feel like yeah, I feel like there might be one or two more, because I spoke with some, and I think that they said that they had signed on to it. So maybe, I don't know if it was like a philosophical sign on, but let me check.
Well, sometimes there's a lag. I'm going by what's on, and I'll put up the link in the chat, the link to the actual legislation, which lists the people, the council members sponsoring, but that doesn't mean that, they just haven't had a chance to update. Because I've been in the same position where I got an email from a council member saying, yes, we signed on, but their name doesn't appear on the list online, for a couple more days. So I'll put that in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you, because that's an action item that we can move forward. And Leah, sorry, girl. Don't talk it. I got it. I promise you, I got it. I promise you, I got
Star Wars. So yes, Dinowitz is my council member, and he is really, really, really an advocate for it, which is really good to know. I was gonna say, Dior, when you get that cartoon character or whatever going, I need you in my neighborhood, because I'm in Community Board 8. We're the only community board in the Bronx that has curbside composting, but we have a lot of co-op boards that are just against it. And I have a little bit of information why that might be. Dior, you and I can talk offline one time about that. But I really want to do what I can to increase what we can in my neighborhood, or rather my community board, because the more people that participate, the better it is, the more we show that people are really interested. So I really want to work in that direction. And Allison, you and I were at ZWA, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So that's you. So we meet again here. Allison and I just completed the Zero Waste Academy.
Lovely.
Which was awesome. And I was
I feel like I need to do it just because I should have that. I feel like I should have that.
So interesting. So much information.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was on Governor's Island at Earth Matters today. That was like one of their field trips. So that was fun.
Wow.
Lovely. All right, perfect. So without further ado, we are going to certainly move forward. Thank you so much, Paul, for being present. I will let you introduce yourself, and then we will hop into the presentation. This one is it's not far off from solid waste. I think, yes, there is a little bit more focus and emphasis, I believe, on, the electrifying, but let's be clear around how that affects air quality, which is an environmental justice issue, which is very much connected to the ways in which we understand waste collection within the city, and specifically within the borough of the Bronx, within the South Bronx. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Paul, and then we'll hop into the presentation to learn a little bit more about this initiative, so that we can figure out what we can do on the ground in order to push it forward a little bit more. Because we need this. This is like one of those things where we don't want it to be like a hit or miss. Like, we don't need this to be we had a really great chance and it fizzled. Like, no, like, this is one of those things that is a make or break moment. And I think that we really need to put as much energy and emphasis behind this as we can, as possible, in order to push it to the other side. So I really want for us to have some clarity around what it is and really grasp it very strongly, and then move in an action oriented way in order to really push it over to the other side based on strategy, just ideas, and really just the genuine support on the ground for supporting this initiative. So yes, Paul, please introduce yourself, and then I will jump into the presentation for you.
Sure. Dior was kind enough to invite me to chat. I've been on a bunch of these calls since it's been created, but way back when, under Freddie Ferrer, I was on the Bronx SWAB, believe it or not, I think in the earliest days. So I am a consultant. I come out of government and community development. I spent most of my career in Hunts Point, and I'm working on an effort to bring a $10 million NYSERDA grant to the Bronx to launch the first publicly accessible freight charging hub for electric vehicles on a 3.1 acre brownfield site in Hunts Point. And it would also involve 2 fleet deployments of electric vehicles, one set of refrigerated electric vehicles for City Harvest, and another set of electric vehicles, including a Mack electric sanitation cut down truck. for the Drivers Cooperative, which is a worker-owned TNC company. It competes with
Oh,
on stage. So I'm here. Did you lose me for a
yep,
second?
there we go. You're back.
And I'm wondering if we can go through the deck.
Yep.
Dior, does that make sense?
You got it.
Thanks.
We
I appreciate it.
will go through the deck, going through the deck.
Mhm. That is the official deck song of this.
Going to the deck.
Will you just show the mural on the back of the point real quick?
Absolutely.
So that's on behind 940 Garrison Avenue on Barretto Street. And that's actually a rendering from a picture from the Youth Climate March that was way back when. I guess that was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And gorgeous picture. And that's really, those are real people, not just images. Anyway, we can run through this, but the name of the project that we're looking for funding for is called The Bronx is Breathing. And we can go very quickly through this because I think a lot of you know a lot about this stuff already. So,
All right. Let us, you gave us a little overview. We're gonna go.
you know, this largest food distribution hub in Hunts Point, we receive between 15 and 17,000 truck trips a day into the peninsula because of that.
Crazy.
Half of the peninsula is covered by the food distribution center. You'll see it, a better rendering of it in the next couple of slides. There's the peninsula, of course, all along the Bronx River is a food distribution infrastructure.
And really quickly, before we keep going into the presentation, I just want to point out that like its proximity to Rikers Island and this push and initiative around renewable Rikers is also something to consider as we're thinking about ways of handling the waste that comes out of Hunts Point.
Perfect. Hunts Point, that whole area was a coal gasification site. So they used to make coal gas. And by cooking coal at very high temperatures and pressures, and coal gas was used for streetlights, it was used for cooking, it was used for generating energy. And it was a very messy process. So all the coal tailings, the remnants, were dumped in the wetlands around Hunts Point, and that has a bearing on this project, and you'll see in a second. And this, of course, is Hunts Point today. You see the residential area in the upper left. Sanitation has its old salt stockpile, and it used to have its marine transfer station at the very bottom of the site. That was the Hunts Point MTS. It was demolished a couple of years ago. And it's largely just used for household waste, electronics, and salt right now. But the rest of that peninsula, as you can see, 1/2 of the land area is all city-owned food distribution. It's vast. And it is, as I said, the largest food distribution hub in the country. We can move on.
I'm sorry. Okay, so what's sticking out to me right now is when
Go
we
ahead.
did, so we most recently did a tour of the Harlem River Yards waste transfer station. We still need to put that up in a very nice fancy way so folks can kind of see it and tap into it. But one of the things I want to stress here is that, you know, we have a real focus on environmental justice, and we really got to keep that in mind at the forefront as we're thinking about doing this work here in the SWAB. And waterfront access is a really huge deal, right? Like in what it means for people to be able to just balance with the elements, right? Their emotional wellness, and being stripped of access to the waterfront is a very important issue that we still want to make sure that we keep at the center of our hearts, because they're just building more and more things. Like there's like buildings going up, schools going, there's like stuff going up there. It's like, it can't take any more. The environment can't take any more of this development, but yet and still it's happening. So this now becomes an opportunity, you know, to be able to remediate a site, right? And allow it to be able to be used in a way that supports communal wellness and that development. And honestly, like the idea of being able to have less gas trucks on the road is really significant. So I just wanted to just point that out really quickly.
Wonderful. Wow. So as you probably all know, we have 13,000 residents in Hunts Point. It is a huge industrial area. We can move on, but in relative to you guys, we still have 9 waste transfer facilities. That's way less than the 26 we used to have, but it still contributes to a significant amount of trucking on the roadways and congestion, and obviously all the attendant problems of living near a waste transfer station, most of which are putrescible, some of which are C&D. they both have their charms.
Every time I see this 16,000 truck trips daily, like it's a very mind blowing number. It's one thing to have an awareness of it, and it's another thing to like physically see. I mean, you see it if you live in the area, you can experience it, but just the thought of that to me is crazy. Like it's wild. Like who designed that?
Yeah, it was some bad planning way back when. The idea behind what we're working on is we want to start seeding an EV ecosystem in Hunts Point for freight. There are now freight class 7, class 8 electric vehicles, over the road trucks, tractor trailers that are electric, sanitation trucks that are heavy duty that are electric. We want to make sure that when this transition happens, that it benefits the people who bore the burdens of the fossil fuel economy, like people who live near the Bruckner and Hunts Point. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. So we're candidates, we're finalists actually for a $10 million prize through the NYS Clean Transportation Challenge. There are 5 finalists in the Clean Neighborhoods Challenge. They're going to have 3 prizes. We're 1 of 5, so we got a 60% chance of winning this. Let me talk about our team and who we are. That should be on the next slide, I think.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to get there.
I just say that improving the quality of life is at the top of the agenda for NYSERDA. It's interesting. Most of their awards and RFPs want to fund new technology, and they want to fund, pilots of things. This is really about quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So we can run through this. So part of our solution involves working with Volvo Trucks, and they're the ones who are making the over-the-road heavy-duty trucks, which we'll see in a minute. And Shell Recharge, which 4 weeks ago was called Green Lots. It was taken over by Shell. But what it does is they build multi-user electric vehicle charging hubs. And essentially what they're doing is trying to plant infrastructure at strategic locations around the United States in anticipation of having an electric economy or electric drive economy. There's only 5 electric trucks in all of Hunts Point right now that are on the road. So this is a very far-sighted investment, and people have to be very patient, and these guys have enough capacity and capital to be patient. They're also under a lot of pressure from the EU because they have to shed 50% of their carbon by 2030. That's any EU company has to do that. So they are a Dutch company.
What is it, EEU?
EU, the European Union.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I heard 2 E's. Got it.
No, that's okay. And so what they're proposing is up to 36 charging units, 22 fast charging units, and 10 to 12 level 2, which were more appropriate for cars on the site. We'll take a look at the site in a minute.
Sorry, I'm like trying to do.
Okay, it's okay.
I'm like trying to do chat, and don't worry, don't pay me no mind. I'm here. I just want to make sure I don't miss nothing. Right. Y'all keep me on board.
So the proposal includes solar canopies throughout. They build canopies above the charging stations anyway. This is just putting solar on top of those canopies. And that would feed. Hunts Point has a community solar project that they're working on. So this would contribute 1 megawatt of solar to that project. And it would be distributed locally to subscribers. There'd also be, because it takes up to 90 minutes for these over the road trucks to charge, there would be a locally owned food and beverage concession. Some of you may know Kelston Bascom from Bascom Catering in Hunts Point. He's we're talking to about owning and operating the food and beverage. And it would be a chance to put healthy meals in the bellies of people who often don't have access to healthy meals, which is great. Within the building, we also want to do CDL and EV workforce training with the drivers cooperative. We'll talk about them in a minute. And because again, if you're charging your vehicle, even if you have a small Nissan Leaf, you may be there for 30 to 45 minutes. We want to have outdoor space, we want to have picnic tables. We want to have charging for e-bikes and so forth, because this is very close to the waterfront. We can move on.
Quick question. Since it's an old brownfield site, right? What is the plan that makes it safe to still occupy the space with this new, development?
So the development itself caps the site. It's concrete and asphalt over it, but there is permeability. There's a liner. I don't know what they call it. I think it's like a 20 mil liner. It's a thick liner that is between the contaminated soil, which is the coal gasification remains from the coal gasification facility, and the fill. And then there's, 18 inches to 2 feet of fill above that. And then you have to cap it. So, we have to make sure that it's done right. But the important thing also to realize is if you don't do this, there are very few uses you could imagine putting here. You're not putting a kindergarten here or a nursery school. Food related uses would probably be prohibitively expensive in terms of all the excavation you have to do. And there are parts of this site that are not contaminated where you can actually put a building, but large parts of it are. So we're going to run the wires overhead rather than trenching through the ground. So a lot of this is all going to be run above rather than on the site.
And the solar is meant to support the project, but what are the other ways the solar will be used? Like just to
Some of
power
it
the
could be
building?
Some of it could be banked in battery banks, because one of the big problems with fast charging is you get demand charges. If you are a Con Ed customer and you suddenly need like a 0.5 megawatt of power and you put a surge on the local grid, instead of paying 18 cents a kilowatt hour, you may end up paying $3 a kilowatt hour. And that progressively eats into the ability of EVs to be a financially viable investment for the co-op or for any of these fleets. However, if you have batteries, you can draw from those batteries when you have those temporary surges and you don't get a demand charge. So some of the power would probably be banked by the charging station hub. The rest of it would be sold into the community as part of community solar, and you would have subscribers to that. That's a whole other conversation, but it's a great program that New York State has.
Excellent. Thank you. And y'all feel free, if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat. I'm not watching the chat as much, but put them there though. We'll get to them.
So on this hub will also be City Harvest trucks that are already based in Hunts Point at the co-op market. They want to replace their fleet of 6 diesels with 6 electrics. One of them will be an over-the-road tractor trailer. That blue cab you see, that is an electric truck. You see the battery packs underneath. And it looks like almost any other over-the-road truck, diesel, gas-powered truck in the US, but it's zero emission. So they would have one of those Class 8 trucks and they would have 5 Class 7. The interesting thing about this is that they would all have electric refrigeration, which is very unusual, hard to find, and a real limiting factor for people in the city who want to deploy electric trucks and deliver food for a living. So this means that City Harvest would all their deliveries in the Bronx would be zero emission to every soup kitchen and food pantry.
That's better.
We can move on. I'm sorry. The other solution, the other fleet that would be based at this hub is a fleet that's being put together with the Drivers Cooperative. The Drivers Cooperative is now a 6,000 member cooperative. When we wrote this, it was 3,500 members. There are drivers who have largely left Uber and Lyft. In some cases, they still work for Uber and Lyft, but they make much more money working through the Drivers Cooperative because they're owners of it. And when you drive for Uber and Lyft, you give away, I think, 40% of each fare back to Uber and Lyft, to the TNC company, the platform. You're giving it back to the app, basically. The Drivers Cooperative, you give 15% back to yourself, essentially, to a worker-owned co-op. So, it's an interesting concept that's actually working, and it makes a lot of sense for something that requires very expensive equipment like cars and trucks. The Drivers Cooperative wants to get into trucking because they know that trucking is a high-value service in New York, and there's not enough CDL drivers. And a lot of their drivers have CDLs, but don't have trucks.
Mm-hmm. My question is there, how do they do it? Is there an app? I feel like I may have downloaded it before.
Co-op Drive. Just download Co-op Drive.
All right, y'all, we all should I mean, I drive and have a car, so I never really have a use for that, but I do think that I would love to download it. And is this co-op? This is not only New York. This is around.
Now it is.
Okay.
This is pretty new. It's only about a year old, but it functions just like any other ride hail app.
Co-op driver.
Co-op Drive.
Co-op Drive.
Yeah.
And someone's putting it in the chat?
They have two different ones. So is it co-op drive or co-op ride? There's like,
Let's go up drive.
okay, because they have two different, well, the co-op ride has 10,000 plus
Oh,
downloads.
that's interesting. You know what? They may use both apps. I don't know. I've always used, try Co-op Ride.
Oh, you know what? Co-op drive are for the drivers. Co-op
right.
ride is
That's
for the
right.
riders.
That's right.
So it's co-op ride. This is it. If we could I'm like, we gotta support them. So I'm trying to show you what the logo looks like, but it's co-op ride, and it's like green. You can't see it because of the reflection, but it's like green circles or whatever. It's like you can see it there. I'm gonna install that now. And yes, thanks for
That's great. I'd rather give it to the drivers than give it to the platform.
right, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the easiest ways to support economic democracy. You got to take that cab anyway. In some cases, it's exactly the same driver you would get if you went through Uber, because a lot of people drive for both. But they make more money through the cooperative.
Yeah, it's because more people have to know it exists in order to be able to use it as an alternative service. So until they get there, of course, maybe they'll still work for Uber until more folks start actually like collectively in the Bronx. I would love for us to all be like, nope, this is what we use now, right? But the people gotta know. A lot of people don't know. There's like a very stressful time. A lot is happening. We're all still trying to fix the world while fixing ourselves. And, you know, there are just days that are really, really hard. So I think that, you know, this is a very tangible way to like align with what does it look like for us to kind of take our power back a little bit. And there's always power in our dollar and where we choose to spend it. So, you know, if this is one step in that direction of what it looks like to support others, like I'm always down for supporting other worker-owned cooperatives, because it's very clear that the workers actually own the business. So there's way more support and there's way more of a benefit. And you know that, you know, it's not an extractive system. People are like really here to try to maintain their livelihoods as a collective and care about the environment. So I love that this drivers cooperative is a part of this initiative, because it says a lot for the people living here and working here to be a part of this project from inception.
Yeah. And I don't want to go too far down the road, but you know, a lot of their drivers, the regular drivers who are driving an Escalade or a Highlander and would pick you up and take you somewhere, also have CDLs. In other words, they can drive trucks, but they can't afford trucks. You know, the cheapest medium duty truck out there is going to cost you $80,000. And the point for us here is if they can use their CDL and jointly operate these heavy duty and medium duty electric trucks, they have the capacity to make a lot more money and make a lot more money for the cooperative, because the value of a CDL of driving a truck in New York City is extraordinary right now. And then driving a zero emission truck, I mean, that's incalculable in terms of how helpful that is to the environment. So we can run through this. We're almost done here. There's a site that all this is going to happen, where City Harvest and the cooperative would be based and charge their trucks, and where the charging hub would be built by Shell Recharge. It's really 3.1 acres, not 3.2, not a big deal, but it's very close to the Fulton Fish Market, if you know that corner of the Bronx. It is a brownfield site, but it has been remediated. We can run through the next one. There it is overhead. You can see the areas where it's capped with concrete. That's where no grass is growing.
Like here.
Yep, exactly. And those are places, for instance, where we can't excavate, we can't build a building.
How does this with Metropolitan being right across the street from it?
It's a problem. I mean, but it's a problem for the whole city. Yeah. Remember, that's the only route into the world's largest food distribution center. The Halleck Street to Food Center Drive, that's how every food delivery truck who's going to the meat market, to the fish market, to Baldor, to Citarella, that's how they all have to go. So when Metropolitan blocks that street with their waste haulers, they're blocking basically the food supply for New York City. So they can't do it for long. That's an enforcement issue, but that's a little inside baseball for Hunts Point right there.
But I think that then becomes useful for how we can connect this to SWAB work, right? Because like that's very much SWAB land. So let's figure out how we could talk through Yeah, what that could mean, I don't know what, but
Yeah.
I think that it's useful to explore that conversation because yeah, that when I think about this hub going in there, obviously it's going to create more traffic in the area because folks will be coming here. But it's not obviously, ideally it's not traffic that pollutes the air, but it would essentially make it congested in an already congested space. So I think continuing to think through that, and I know we talked about some things, and like we're able to see some plans for the site last week. But yeah, I would really be curious on what some solutions would sound like, because it just feels like more congestion too.
Yeah, absolutely. Our assumption is that trucks are not gonna, it's pretty hard to get to this. Unless you're going to Hunts Point, you're not gonna get off the Bruckner for this. There are alternatives that most people would have. So we're really trying to capture resident fleets that visit Hunts Point every night. And the reason why this does connect to the SWAB also is that there are now electric garbage trucks. Sanitation is piloting 4 of them, and they are heavy duty Class 8 trucks. They're very expensive. They're $750,000. I mean, because they need so much battery to operate the blade, to compress the trash, and then still run the motor, so to do the routes. And one electric sanitation truck made by Mack is part of this project. So we have 1 or 2 more pictures.
No,
That may be worth, that's what the site looks like from ground level. It's a prairie. I mean, it's vast. 3 acres in New York City, pretty unusual to find.
Yeah.
And then that's it. I mean, we're happy to answer questions, talk through anything with you.
Perfect. Did you not want to, let me see, I think there was a little bit more left, or a couple more slides, but awesome. Thank you for that. So I mean, if y'all have some questions, I don't know if I missed any questions in the chat, but my main thing is, and thank you for giving us this presentation and making us aware of what is actually happening and what's going on with this. My main question, as it has been for a while, is how do we support this to get this to the other side? Because I think that this is a very significant, oh, Leah, you had a question, sorry.
Yeah, but you don't have to interrupt your sentence.
I didn't see it with the Simpsons in the background. The yellow blended in very nicely with the background. But my main thing is, what, in your experience with strategy, right? What is the best way for us to make more noise about this? Because this is relatively new to me, this project, but it's something that I think is very significant for the Bronx. I think it's very historical. I think that it sends a real message around how we are putting efforts to kind of when I think about environmental justice, I always say I think about restitution, which is putting back what you've taken. So this to me feels like an act in that direction. And I would really like to be able to amplify this. I think we're trying to beef up the work that we're doing with the SWAB, which is why we're getting more on the ground and planning events out and to be able to touch people over the summer. So we'll be doing less congregating like this and more congregating like outside doing things and raising noise. And obviously this will be one of the initiatives that we amplify so that people know that it's around, it's aware, and how they can support it. But my main question is really, what is the way that we get NYSERDA to say, like, absolutely, we want this, you should do this, you should support it, right? Like, what does that look like? Calling local city council members? Does that look like calling NYSERDA reps? Do we need to, have a call-a-thon? Do we need to go out and get petitions in the city, right? To say that, hey, we've told people about this who didn't know about it before, they know now, they support it. Like, do we need to do a nice little fancy hip hop rap video so that they can see, like, and let that start being shared around? Like, what is it that we need to do to rev this up so that we can see it pass and be successful?
Well, I'm out of the game. I'm not in politics anymore. But what always occurred to me, especially this is a gubernatorial election year. So where is the governor weak? I think she sees herself as weak in the outer boroughs of New York City. I think she feels she's perceived as a Western New York or upstate candidate. And so I always like to think about the groundswell of support that we could demonstrate in a borough like the Bronx for this project, which could be meaningful. How do you demonstrate? How do you, signify a groundswell of support? Things are complicated during COVID because it's a lot harder to do a lot of in-person events. But the assemblywoman for this district, Amanda Septimo, who you guys should know if you don't already, She came out of the environmental justice movement. Would like to do a press conference and rally on or about the 9th of June, maybe the 10th of June, but it would be the first or second week of June. We would love to have the SWAB involved. I don't know if you guys are able to endorse things. Because
Yeah, what we'll do is we can write a letter. I mean, we're still like relatively trying to figure out the structural part of that, but we could have a letter written and then just take a vote on it for those who are members, and that's really how we can do it.
Our partners at The Point have been doing a Twitter campaign. If you go on their Twitter feed, I think The Point CDC, they have some really moving stuff that they've been posting about, kind of really moving black and white pictures of trucks besieging Hunts Point, and with tags like the Bronx is choking and electrify Hunts Point. And, you know, having that being retweeted and recirculated, I'm not sure how much Twitter means anymore, and I'm not sure how many elected officials really pay attention to it. But again, in lieu of lots of big in-person rallies and events post-pandemic, it may be some substitute in helping us get the message out. And then just talking to policymakers as well. I mean, you know, what if Trade Waste Commission permits were premised on a certain number of electric trucks? What if to get through the BIC, you had to show that you were greening your operations? You know, the Business Integrity Commission, which is a big deal for the waste industry in Hunts Point. What if there were, you know, every Part 360 permit had an alt fuels requirement? You know, I mean, I'm just thinking maybe this should be the cost of doing business in the waste industry in Hunts Point. Totally separate from the NYSERDA proposal, but I just feel like these are things that we need to raise. I mean, if we had waste companies that weren't running diesel trucks, they'd still be noxious in a way. I mean, we'd still have emissions from each transfer station, but the biggest problem we're dealing with every day is the diesel emissions, the PM 2.5, ground level ozone, NOx and SOx from these trucks. So.
Thank you. Go for it, Leah.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
You were talking about charging. I heard something about 45 minutes. I have to say, I don't know enough about that, about electric vehicles, how long they take to charge. But the one thing that I think I hear a lot is that it takes a while to charge and it can only go a certain distance. So how long would it take to charge a truck like that? And how far would they be able to go on that charge? And would these trucks also elsewhere find other places to charge? So does this make sense? I mean, obviously it makes sense, but I'd like to know
the
how it
most
makes
important
sense.
thing to realize is that most fleets that are domiciled or go to sleep every night in New York City do 30 miles a day. It's a small city. So that's the first most important thing to realize. The Class 8 over-the-road trucks, like the Volvo truck you saw in one of those slides, has a range of about 250 miles. Now, discount that easily by 10% based on, you know, how often they use their lift gate, how many hills they have to climb, whether the temperature is above 32 degrees, all those things, topography, other electronics use on the vehicle, weather, temperature, all affect range. But the base range on that vehicle is 250 miles. So even if we knocked 50 miles off it and they get 200 miles a day in use and they plug it in every night when they return to their depot or they return to this charging hub, they'll get 7 days or 6 days of use before they have to charge again.
So it's really just local driving. And how long does it take to charge a vehicle like that?
It's like, you know, it's like your gas tank. If you come to the gas station with half a tank and you're only putting in half a tank, you can fill up pretty quickly. You're done in 90 seconds. If you have a full tank or you're fully at empty, it's going to take twice as long. So if you come into a charging station with your battery fully drained and you have that 250 mile version of the Volvo truck, it's going to take you an hour and a half.
Okay.
We see as an opportunity. I mean, truckers have rough lives. I mean, this is one thing to keep in mind. It is really hard being on the road, you know, 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, and without a break. And what we want to be able to do is give them a place to have a good meal, and courtesy of a local restaurateur, locally owned restaurant, to perhaps stretch a little bit. We want to have outdoor, one of the things that Shell is talking about is outdoor exercise equipment so that people can, stretch their back and stretch their legs and so on. And we want to be able to make it a hub where they want to come back to, and not just them. Think about 2,200 city vehicles are EVs now, are plug-in. That's a lot. New York City has the largest plug-in fleet in the country, not just of municipal governments, but of any kind, private or public. New York City has the largest EV fleet. Think about all the EVs that pass through the Bronx every day en route to, in building inspections or park inspections or what have you. We want them to be able to charge here, and also whether it's en route to grab a meal, spend their dollars in Hunts Point, relax. And so, the time factor is definitely a negative in some ways for on-demand fleets. We get that, but we think it's a real positive for economic development because they have to do something. Let's let them spend their money in Hunts Point on a locally owned business and get some dollars circulating within that community.
Okay, thank you. And 2 more questions. You mentioned transfer stations. Are those, who are using the transfer stations? Is that commercial waste or?
The transfer stations in Hunts Point are almost entirely commercial waste, except for one, which is the Sims facility on Edgewater Road, which takes New York City recycling and floats it on barges out the Bronx River, then the East River, all the way out to Brooklyn or Jersey City, depending on where the recycling is heading.
So when you say commercial, you mean commercial businesses and
commercial carters dump there. They pay tipping fees to dump trash, and sometimes it's construction debris at certain kinds of transfer stations. Sometimes it's putrescible waste at other kinds of transfer stations.
One of the things Allison and I learned in Zero Waste Academy the past couple of weeks is that the way they explained it to us is that currently the commercial haulers have business accounts like all through the city.
Mhm.
You have like, I don't know, 50, 60 different ones. So you have 50, 60 companies sending trucks all over the place, which is a lot of miles, a lot of emissions and all that. They're changing it. I think in the next year that haulers are going to have, for the most part, there's going to be zones. And if they work in a zone, they're going to have a lot of customers there. It's really going to cut down on all the miles driven, which is going to make a really big difference. Okay, so last question. This will be an easy one. Do you have a website or anything like that that talks about what you just shared
Yes,
with us?
there's a page on the, let me put something in the, it's huntspoint.nyc. I'll put it in the chat. And I think Cecil want to ask a question too.
Great, thank you. Very interesting. I was very happy to hear about this. Okay, I'm done with my questions. Next person can go.
Thank you so much. Go for, okay, Lilibeth, just be on it. Lilibeth.
It's my job.
Lilibeth, that is the correct one, Lilibeth. Thank you very much for sharing that. Go for it, Cecil.
Hey everyone, happy Monday, happy National Penny Day. Sorry for
You
joining.
and the national days. You always. Anyway, go ahead. It's your thing. I like it. It's on brand.
Everyday special. Calendar industry lobbies Congress hard. It's crazy.
Great. So true.
But yeah. No, I did a little research right before joining, and I know some of your work, Paul. So something with the EV charging stations, and from what I've heard from Dior, a while back, from another meeting a while back, it seems really hard to like plan for a lot of those EV stations with just a lot of hands in the pot. And from what I've heard, like at work, like with Congress, the community board sometimes get involved in the process, or like DOT when finding the right street or the right parking lot to put a station in. And so I'm just not sure how those issues should be prioritized. So, I mean, from what you see and what you presented here, is there any sense for like a very urgent barrier to more EV stations, especially in the outer boroughs, that we should be looking at?
Well, curbside is a problem. A lot of the council people do not want to lose any more parking. They're still upset over City Bike, for instance, in Salamanca's district, for instance. And so to put curbside charging stations in already is sort of a third rail for people. And remember, not a lot of people in our congressional district or my old congressional district own cars, like 30% or less. But they're very vocal. So curbside charging stations, very difficult in most parts of the Bronx to site because it takes a spot out of circulation. But this site is a publicly owned site. It's an EDC site. EDC is favoring this use, sent us a nice letter of support. And it would be off street, so you don't lose parking. Nobody complains about that. But it's also inside the busiest trucking hub in the Northeast, one of the busiest in the country. So trucks are headed there anyway. They need a place to charge. There's actually not even a gas station close by the market. You have to go all the way to the edges of the peninsula to get to a gas station. And you have to pass through the residential area to get to the gas stations, which is even worse. So we think this makes a lot of sense. We think it's a great land use for a brownfield, which otherwise probably would have stayed unused for the foreseeable future.
And with just a quick follow-up, with a lot of the construction happening like by Hunts Point and the South Bronx in general, do you have any thoughts or anyone else on what we should be pushing developers and construction companies to include, or should they just be kept separately?
No, I mean, like if you have the chance to negotiate a community benefits agreement with a developer, I mean, you want clean fuel, construction equipment, you want clean fuel haulers if you could get them. You want mandatory requirements to put charging stations in if they're building garages or parking lots, not just the city's very limited, I think 1 to 10 requirement, which I think gets waived a lot. You want aggressive goals. And you want to find a way to either incentivize them or require them to use as much clean fuel equipment as possible. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy to. I like talking about this stuff. It used to be, we didn't have these trucks. They were garage experiments, they were science experiments. And you could talk about this, but it was a fantasy. Now they exist and they're commercially available. So one more excuse is removed from the argument.
Now, one question I do have, and this is just, and I know we're like wrapping up, but, and just flow with me here, because like long-term planning, right? What is the life of this sanitation truck electric vehicle, right? Like, is it possible to replace the battery and it still is like very functional and can work? What is the lifespan on the battery currently now? I know that there's like a really huge awareness around just e-vehicles and the battery disposal and like just really not having a real plan. And so as we think about like, yes, I completely 100% agree that having not an electric truck driving through a neighborhood as opposed to a diesel truck with fumes, absolutely, I agree that that is 100% the switch, right? But what happens with the end of the battery, right? Like how long is it really expected to go for? And has it been tested for that amount of time yet? Or are we just kind of going with like, here's the estimate of what could possibly happen? And then is there a plan from these companies to deal with the batteries in a responsible way once they are no longer able to be used?
Some Nissan does that. Most of these batteries are warranted for 100,000 miles. So at the end of 100,000 miles, the company, the fleet, the person, whoever would have to pay for the replacement themselves, which is expensive. I mean, these batteries are probably the single most expensive element in an electric vehicle. They can be $200 a kilowatt hour. And if you have 100 kilowatt hour battery, I don't know, do the math, is that $20,000? I mean, it's a lot of money. And it's beyond the means of most people and most small businesses for that matter. What happens end of life, which we hope is more like 200,000 miles and not 100,000 miles. End of life, a lot of companies like Volkswagen, like, as I said, Nissan, BMW now are experimenting with take back or buyback programs, because even when a battery is depreciated for moving a truck or a car, it has a lot of life for things like backup power, solar storage, demand mitigation or demand charge mitigation, as I was explaining. In other words, the most power intensive use is moving a 4,000 or 10,000 pound piece of steel. That's when you need a fully operational 100% battery. But if you have a 50% battery that doesn't take you as far as it might have, you pull it out of that car or truck, and it has lots of uses in energy services. And it could go another 10 or 15 years for energy services, as we're talking about demand charge mitigation, frequency regulation, backup power, solar storage. Those batteries in the next market, in the secondary market, have a lot of value. So it's a good question. And there's a business there for someone who's ambitious and can figure this out, because there's going to be this endless waste stream. You're absolutely right, of depreciated batteries coming out of electric cars in about 10 years.
Yeah. And I appreciate knowing that there is a second, thing that we can possibly use them for. So we can keep that in mind, especially as we're thinking about inspiring, local economy. Leah, you had a question?
So the batteries are very expensive, which I just learned and sort of knew. But there's other things. Once you have an electric vehicle, there's a lot of other parts that you don't have to service that, combustion engine cars have that you don't. So you save and you have this more expensive battery. Does it even out, or how does it?
Depends how intensively you use it. If you're a sanitation truck, for instance, making composting runs, and you're working 7 days a week and going 50 miles a day, your return on investment, you might be able to, get a payback within 5 years, because the sanitation truck is very expensive. The more you use it, the quicker the return on your investment. The less you use it, the longer it takes to pay back. In other words, you're saving on operations, but you're spending upfront. And, so the more you operate, the more intensively you operate that vehicle, the more you save, the quicker you pay back that added cost. So for some trucks and some vehicles, you get a payback in 3 years, because you use it so much and you're saving so much. If you pay 15 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity versus $5 a gallon for diesel right now, it's really remarkable how much you save per mile.
So it makes financial sense.
To operate it, to buy it, you're absolutely right. These trucks are 1.5 or 2 times the cost of a conventional fuel truck. So
do most owners reach the point where financially it's better to buy an EV?
not yet. No, I can't say that. Not without subsidy. I mean, the state and the federal government provide very generous subsidies right now for electric trucks. And that's the way to go. The state will provide, I think, through the New York City Clean Trucks program, up to $185,000 per electric truck.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's some very generous subsidies.
Wait, say that again.
I think it's $185,000. I can send you details on it.
Please.
Yeah.
Please. That's information that I'm glad I just got at this moment. That was actually very valuable, necessary right now. So please. Awesome. Do we have any other questions? This is actually really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in and giving us this. Now, I really want to move back to like the push to get support for this and to make sure that it moves to success. So we have our call coming up this Friday we have like merged our environmental justice and legislative committees in order to be able to push and do our work. So what I would suggest is that's the meeting to tap into on Friday, because we're going to actually have, thank you so much for that, Paul, because we're actually going to be planning our event in CB4, but I think that it might make sense. What's the not deadline, but when is like the timeline of this thing? When is NYSERDA gonna respond back to you? I really am like, who do we need to be like letting know that we want this thing here? But what's the timeline? Like, does it obviously it's always nice to move now, but when is the next round of decisions going to happen?
So June 7th was the deadline for this. It's just been pushed back by NYSERDA to June 23rd. So we have a little bit more time, a little bit more time for advocacy too, to talk this up.
Okay, all right. Let's figure out how to prioritize it. We have the call on Friday. I'm going to make sure that we center that on top of our event in CB4. Essentially, what you're talking about is what is it, CB1, Hunts Point?
No, CB2.
2, right?
CB1 is
Okay.
Port Morris, yeah.
So who is our representative from CB2?
You talking about council?
Nah,
Solomon.
for the Bronx SWAB, we have like a community board rep, because I'm thinking that they may make the most sense, because if it's June 23rd, it may make sense to strategize with them as well. Who is our rep for CB2, Lilibeth?
I would have to look.
Oh, okay. I
I
thought
don't know off the top of my head.
no, it's fine. It's fine. I definitely didn't expect you to tell me off the top of your head. I just thought that maybe you might have been in the Bronx SWAB Gmail or Google Drive, and it would have been a whole lot simpler to pull it up. But I'm gonna actually look right now. I know I'm gonna let y'all go and get off the phone, but I want to get off the Zoom. I always call the Zoom the phone. I am always literally like, wait till I get off the phone. CB2, we do not have a rep for CB2. Okay, so that's where we need to be able to press and push and get that galvanization happening. But outside of that, I would like to strategize. That's kind of where I'm at, is like, I don't have full awareness of this program, of this, of this push, but I would very much reading the chat and trying to talk at the same time I'm gonna look at that afterwards. But for the rest of y'all, I'm gonna say Lilibeth will help me understand what's happening in the chat real quick.
Yeah.
But I don't, in my mind, have a clear vision of how we can support this in a way that is action oriented to show them, like, yes, there's like the groundswell of support. I understand that in a philosophical way, but like to be able to say, like, nah, like we had a bunch of people come out to stand in front of something, and we got pictures of a bunch of folks out here saying, hey, we want this thing. Or, like I said, the petition thing, being able to push that, like, is that that petitions for me are also very philosophical, but it does show that there are people who support an idea. And that's really where I find value in petitions and saying, okay, we've got this amount of people that say, yes, we want it, so that it does something. But I would love to identify a strategy for really, and since you said June 23rd, it's about a month, so that's not a lot of time to work with. So if we're going to prioritize really trying to get behind supporting this thing, we need a clear line and clear strategy on how we can do that. So I'm going to save that for Friday's conversation as we think about planning for CB4's event, but also seeing if there's maybe some sort of online push that we can have happen with this, if there's some sort of on the ground thing. I'm not sure, but I think that we have enough smart folks in the room to put our heads together to figure out what's the best way to get NYSERDA's attention. And then as far as the comment in the chat, DSNY gets adequate funding to ensure the organic rollout is a success. And yes, great. Another meeting to discuss organics. We don't specifically have a committee for that, to be quite honest. I think that we're working with what we got. And so EJ and legislative is what we're pushing to. I think I have a very an interest and stake in what happens with that. So I'm happy to chat with you, Allison, directly in order to kind of talk about the ways that we can galvanize folks. And yes, Leah. Yes, what you saying? What's happening over there?
Meaning I have an interest too. Don't forget about me, Dior.
Excellent. So I think what might be happening very organically, pun intended, is that we might be organically coming up with an organics committee that might be revealing itself slowly right now. So Leah, I think, let's
Dior, I knew you when.
Way back when, we got MC, you know what I'm saying, history together. So absolutely. So yeah, let's see if maybe, an organics little committee could come out of the interest that we see that's building again in a very organic way. So that's good. Allison, I really appreciate you being here, because it's very helpful to have that, like, us kind of coming together to kind of push these initiatives collectively, not only for our individual boroughs, but really just the city as a whole and residents. It's difficult sometimes times of coming to this work and it's like, you're like the trash nerd and everybody else is looking at you like, oh, that's dirty work. And we're like, look, we're trying to make your life better. Okay. If you handle this stuff better, your life will be better too. So, you know, we really gotta push that. And it's okay. You know, the things that are difficult on the other side of it is usually the most fruitful and beneficial at the end. So thank you so much, Paul, for being here. We'll talk about this more on our call on Friday and figure out how we can amplify this and make a little bit more noise. There might be a hip hop song coming to a theater near you, Paul, because I'm a little inspired by this presentation. So I'm gonna throw in a beat afterwards and see what I could conjure up. And maybe we might even be able to do a little small video. So I'll talk to you about the treatment for that to try to get something that we can use as an, what's the word that I'm looking for? And like an entertainment tool to like entertain folks, but really educate them at the same
A
time.
catalyst.
Yeah, exactly.
I put a link to the New York State VIP program. That's the voucher incentive program for electric trucks. The top voucher incentive is $185,000 for heavy duty electric trucks. There
Yep.
are subsidies out there and the waste industry should start taking advantage of them too.
Yep. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. I will see you on Friday. For those of you, I'm going to send out an email to everybody that was here today just to give you the link for Friday's call. And then we'll talk and we'll continue building these events. And thank you so much for being present. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dior.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody else.